Hello, horror hounds. Please excuse my croaky voice. I'm getting over a cold at the moment, and I haven't given myself an easy task for this video. I'm going to try and tackle a very tricky film to talk about, quite a tricky film to watch. Lucio Fulci's New York Ripper, a film that, right off the bat, I have to flag as saying is one for gorehounds only. It's not an easy watch. You will be hard pressed to read or watch on YouTube a review of this film that doesn't use the word sleazy. It is a sleazy film. It's intentionally a sleazy film. The word that comes up almost as often as sleazy is nasty. It's a nasty film. It's a mean-spirited, sleazy, nasty film, and intentionally so. Uh, Many strongly argued accusations of misogyny have been levelled at the director Lucio Fulci and this movie. Uh, and there are counter arguments. And I'm going to try and walk the tightrope between the two. I've seen this once now. Let's put this into some kind of context, personal context. I've owned this for quite a while because I wanted it in my collection. But it's not the kind of film you put on straight away. You have to be in the mood to watch it. So I've seen it once now. It's probably the kind of film that I will maybe only watch once or perhaps twice, but I'm going to have to let it lie fallow in my mind for quite some time before I go back maybe and watch it a second time. One thing you can't deny about this film, it starts as it means to go on, and there's a directness and a purity of intent, whether you agree with the intent or not, whether you're happy with the product or not. There's a very cold, calculating kind of purity to this film. It does what it means to do. Now, that purity may be artistic, or it may be on the calculating level of lowest common denominator shock tactic, controversy. And I'm not expert enough to say which one it was or wasn't. It might help to give some kind of idea of the history of this film, because I think, however you view it, whatever your opinions on the film are, I think what's undeniable is that the attempts to suppress and censor this film have been petrol to the fire of this film's notoriety in the decades since it was made. And if we're going to learn one thing about the history of this film, it's that censorship does not work. In fact, perversely, it works counter to the intent of the censors. Let me give you an idea of what I'm speaking about. These notes are cobbled from Wikipedia and the Internet Movie Database, which don't exactly agree. So please don't take all of this information as gospel, but it gives you an idea. The film was made in 1982. It got no US theatrical release. In 1987, it was released on VHS in the US. It was an 88-minute cut. As I understand it, in the US, an awful lot of the sex was taken out and most of the violence was left intact. This is US censors and UK censors are shadows of one another. They're the opposite sides of the coin, because usually we're okay with sex, and we're more censorious towards the violence. In the UK, it was refused a theatrical certificate when it came out. The BBFC, British Board of Film Classification, chairman, James Furman, famously ordered all the prints of this film to be escorted by police to the airport and flown out of the country. So he considered this hugely controversial figure in the history of British film classification, considered this film to be so dangerous that he organised for every copy, every print to be removed from the country. In 2002, so that's 20 years after it was made, Vipco had a VHS release with 22 seconds cut. That would be 22 seconds of violence in the UK. A DVD release followed by a Blu-ray by Shameless Films had similar cuts of 19 seconds. So 3 seconds in it. One source says that the same amount was cut. Another source says that this has got 3 extra seconds in it. You can get the film uncut from German sources, I believe, but essentially in this country you still cannot get an uncensored, uncut version of this movie. Moves which will only have led to it being talked about in reverential terms. For any horror enthusiast, this would instantly have gone straight to the top or very near the top of their list of holy grail must-see horror movies. Way to go, James Furman. Way to shine a light on something which may, without your intervention, have been much more of a footnote in slasher cinema, in Italian horror cinema, in horror movies in general. It's fair to say that this, I think it came out 2 years after Brian De Palma's Dressed to Kill and William Friedkin's Cruising. I think it's fair to say that this is behind the curve, that those two controversial in their own right films were sort of on the crest of the wave of. This, I think, is much more exploitative than those two films and more low rent. And I think without the fervour and the shrieking panic of the British film censors, and it wasn't just the British, this film didn't get a release in many countries at the time. I unnecessarily don't think that it would have become as talked about as it is now. The actions of those seeking to suppress this means that this becomes, and for each new generation of horror fan, if they're really dedicated to it and want to learn about the history of horror and what came before, they will always hear about The Exorcist. They will always hear about this. They will always hear about Cannibal Holocaust. Now they'll be able to seek them out. I remember when I was a kid, you could not get The Exorcist. That didn't get a VHS release. Wasn't granted classification until the mid-90s, the early 90s, when you could buy it finally on DVD. I bought the DVD of The Exorcist before I had a DVD player. I knew I wanted to own The Exorcist and bought the DVD. It was the first DVD I ever bought because I wanted to own that fucking thing, because it had been denied me. And I knew at some time down the road I'd have to get myself a DVD player so I could watch it. But I wanted to exercise my right to own that fucking film. And so congratulations, BBFC. Congratulations, James Furman. We're talking about the New York Ripper. Now, Lucio Fulci has never, let's be honest, been one to shy away from extreme, gratuitous violence. I've not seen his earlier giallo film, Don't Torture a Duckling, but zombie flesh eaters, The Beyond, things like that. Things with his Gates of Hell trilogy, essentially. Things couched in the supernatural and the fantastical do take a slight edge off that razor blade. But the razor blade, the straight razor in this, is finding its target very much in the real world. This is a film about a person. I'm not going to give away any of the plot because part and parcel with the gore in this, it's a murder mystery. And if you do want to see this film, I'm not going to spoil it for you because the two go hand in hand. And I'll admit, I was intrigued by the mystery. I wanted to find out who it was and why. That's not particularly satisfying, but it's the cart and the horse of this film. The murder mystery and the killings. And so what was I saying? Yeah. The focus of this film is it's very much set in the real world. It's about a person that kills women. And there's no real getting away from that. It's the violence in this is incredibly sexualized, and that's why it's such uncomfortable viewing. There's it's what every gorehound wants or claims to want. There's nudity and there's blood. There's gratuitous, hardcore murders, and there's nudity and there's sex. But there's unflinchingly, the two are combined in this. Women either get naked and are then cut to ribbons, or are cut to ribbons and then stripped so that their naked bodies are on display. There's there's no two ways about it. The violence in this is extremely sexualized, which understandably has led to accusations of misogyny. It's about women being killed in extremely graphic ways and in sexualized ways. Let's put it that way. I think there's more going on in the movie than that, but Fulci plays his cards very, very close to his chest on this one. Or chess is probably a better analogy. Chess features in this game. There's a psychoanalyst that the police use to try and create a profile of this killer, and he's often in the film seen playing against a computerized chess game, so a computerized chess opponent. And weirdly, Fulci's presence in this does seem like the computerized chess player, like a Hal, emotionless, cold, logical, making this film for, as I said, reasons of purity, the cold, logical purity of a machine. It seems to me. So, in a lot of ways, what you'll get from the film is what you bring to the table. And if you get misogyny from that film, I'm not saying that you're wrong, because you can make an extremely strong case. If Fulci wanted to make his point clearer, he could have. He easily could have. However, very near the start of the film, a police detective gives a statistic to us. 11 people are killed in New York every day. More than half of them are women. The first living victim we see, the first interaction she has with a man in the film, the man tells her that she shouldn't be allowed out of the house, that women have the brains of chickens. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, there's a commentary going on here. He's telling us that the world is sexist, the world is misogynist, and he's going to progress to showing us, but he doesn't draw a line between those two dots. And by the end of the film, I'm wondering whether if that's something I made up or something he intended. Um, there's a very notorious scene about halfway through the movie that takes place in a cafe, which could be a sexual assault. Kind of, it is, but at the same time, it it could be defined potentially another way. It's a film you're going to struggle with. You'll have a strong opinion on this film, no matter what happens. Even if that strong opinion is that this film's a fucking piece of shit, and it's not worth the time I'm giving it, you will have a strong opinion about this film. Personally, I think the film is more nihilist than misogynist. I think there's more misanthropy at play here. This is a film that hates everyone and everything. Um, Everyone is sort of like a duplicitous, anchorless scrap of humanity, sort of like scum floating on the surface of the cesspool of New York. And this is a time capsule New York. This is before the cleanup of Times Square. This is where the live sex show theaters were, the prostitutes, the drug takers, and it's sort of like it's like hell on earth, and you start in there and you end. Well, it's the bleakest ending. It, it's the nastiest, most mean-spirited ending. So when I say that Fulci has a purity of vision, he gives no respite at the end of the movie. In fact, what he does is he makes it worse. What it is he was trying to do is not clear. So even that we can argue as a piece of art, we can discuss its meaning or around and around and around. So is that an artistic success or is that an artistic failure? We're assuming he had an intent beyond making a fucking film about people getting killed and making some fucking money off of it. I don't know. Um, there are no easy conclusions to reach about New York Ripper. I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I like it. But what I do know is that any and every attempt to get the film banned, to write it out of the history books, to censor it, ultimately failed. I'm holding it in my hands. Now, purists will say that I'm not holding it in my hands. I'm holding a censored version. I haven't got. There are 19 seconds of New York Ripper that I don't own. And yes, technically you're right. But it exists. We can watch it. We can talk about it. We can disagree about it. We can hate it. Or we can say it's bold and unflinching. But the bottom line is, we can make our own minds up about this kind of thing.